Hello everybody and welcome to our third in series of Growing Australia's Oil and Gas Supply Chain webinars. Today we're going to be focusing on the challenges of being both global and local, and we've got some really interesting guests to join us today for the presentations and then for a discussion and a Q&A to follow. I'll start the webinar with just welcoming everyone to country, acknowledgement of country, and we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet across the whole of Australia, and acknowledge their leaders past, present and emerging. So the webinar, as I mentioned at the start there, we'll have three speakers: Miranda Taylor, so NERA CEO, Colin McIver, who is the Cluster Manager for Joinseeker, and Eric Nild, who is one of the founding members of Deployment Matters. The format for the webinar will be, we'll have short presentations from each of our three speakers, followed by a Q&A, followed by an opportunity to address any questions that you may have as the webinar progresses. So I'll start off really quickly with who NERA is and what the growth centres are. So NERA, as it says above my shoulder there, National Energy Resources Australia, we're one of 6 industry growth centres that were formed around about 4 years ago, each to work with a different sector that's seen as being strategically important to the Australian economy. In our instance, we work with all of the energy resources sector with a primary focus on oil and gas, coal and uranium, and then moving progressively into some of the new and emerging industries as well, and right the way across the value chain, which is why we were so interested to undertake this supply chain work. The report which we've been talking about now, this is the third week we've been talking about it, and also then now that we are in our COVID environment, to have these webinar sessions where we can have the broad conversations with people from wherever they may well be. So I would like now to introduce as our first speaker Miranda Taylor. Miranda's been CEO of NERA since NERA was established, so been in the role now a little over 4 years. Prior to joining NERA, Miranda held a number of senior leadership roles in different parts of the resources sector, and has been and continues to be a significant commentator and just thought leader within the resources sector. So Miranda's going to do a bit of scene setting for us, and then we'll move into the further presentation. So over to you, Miranda.
Thank you, Francis. So welcome everybody to this third in the supply chain webinar series. What I'd like to do is just recap. I don't want to go back through material we've covered in the last 2 weeks, but I would like to just recap a couple of points. First of all, I think that it's worth making the point that Australia and all of the states and Australia nationally are looking at supply chains as we look at what the Australian economy is going to look like through the recovery phase post-COVID-19, but importantly also how we look to transform the economy and address some of the big productivity challenges that we faced before we went into COVID-19. And I think it's fair to say that all governments are seeing supply chains and the global opportunities for our supply chains as one of the big focus areas. And I think the sectors that we're looking at across the country include not just NERA's remit in energy and energy resources, but also things like agribusiness, the mining sector, med technology, and areas where we're going to be able to see a lot of synergies and the ability to do sector transfer of knowledge and technology. So that's the context. In the last 2 weeks, we had a look at where Australia has been traditionally focused, particularly in the oil and gas supply chain, and where the big opportunities are for growth. And to sum up, the general finding was that Australian supply chains in the oil and gas sector have tended to focus on low value and local advantage opportunities, and that's particularly in terms of operating in a very high cost environment. So what the supply chain study showed was that the huge opportunity is from focusing more on higher value. So trying to compete on being innovative and moving up the value curve, and actually finding the cost savings in the bigger story rather than on a unit cost, immediate upfront cost. But what is the productivity gain to the industry from innovative technologies, and understanding how we can actually pull those technologies through and easily integrate them into our businesses. I think there's another point that's worth making about the export local and then the export opportunity, is that Australia obviously is geographically, we've got small markets spread across the country, and therefore to get scale for our supply chain, we need two things. One, we need to work across industry sectors, and technology, digital technology and things like remote ops are enabling that, and we're seeing greater collaborations happening between different industry sectors. And also by being able to group our technologies and our offerings, we're able to give far greater visibility to them, to local and global markets. And one way that we can do that is through clusters. And one of our speakers today is going to talk about the power of clusters and export hubs to actually bring together a range of supply chain companies so that they can give greater access, greater visibility to their customers, both here in Australia, but also globally. So getting market scale is really important. And I think that ability to collaborate within the supply chain is probably one of the key things in understanding how we can seize the local and then also go global. And we really do need to focus on that. NERA, just to conclude, we are doing a lot to work with our supply chain stakeholders to open up global pathways for them. One of the ways we do that is take a range of our small businesses and supply chain companies with us on some global market opportunities in Aberdeen, Houston and Stavanger. And we will be looking to do that in 2021. And also through our technology catalogue, which is a global portal to be able to showcase Australia's best in terms of supply chain technologies and services, and to be able to market those to the world. And our second speaker is from the technology catalogue. So I look forward to hearing from the subsea cluster from Colin and from Eric from the technology catalogue as we discuss the challenges and the opportunities of going both local and global. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Miranda. That was really great. Set the scene, get some good introductions, and really show a thread through where we're going with the rest of our webinar. So as introduced, our next guest is Dr. Colin McIver. Colin is the Cluster Manager for Subsea Innovation Cluster Australia, to give Seeker its full name. A role he's held now for the last year or so. Prior to joining Seeker, Colin's held a number of senior strategic and leadership roles in consulting businesses and big engineering houses. So Colin, over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Francis, and good morning, afternoon, evening, all. So look, Seeker is Subsea Innovation Cluster Australia is a member organisation. We're funded by membership fees, and we're match funded by NERA during our initial incubation stage. I mean, quickly, a cluster is essentially, we have a cluster here in WA that's occurred naturally around subsea due to the growth of the subsea market here. And the aim of Seeker is really to accelerate the growth of that cluster and ensure the cluster growth is sustainable for the future. And really what we're looking at is the sort of supply chain around inspection, maintenance and repair initially, because that's obviously where there's a lot of work going on. But really the way that we're growing is we're really promoting collaboration amongst our members because there's an awful lot of very innovative work going on. But there's a bit of duplication of effort, but also there could be significantly more innovation happening if people knew what their competitors were doing, which is a bit of a dichotomy, I guess. Also, one of the other issues that we've got is that it's very hard for the operators to actually be aware of all the great stuff that is happening locally. And one of the roles of the cluster is to really make that visible So it's to find out what our members are doing and make that available to the operators. And also conversely, to make sure that all of our members are aware of the challenges that the operators are having. I mean, there's no point in people coming out with innovations that don't actually apply to any of the problems that are currently occurring. So on the one hand, we're trying to make all our members' capabilities and innovations very visible, but we're also trying to make sure that the operators' challenges are also visible. So essentially in the short term, as I said, we're looking to really increase the visibility of our members and really showcase the great disruptive technology that's being developed inside Australia. We're really pushing the collaboration front. As they say, never waste a good crisis. And COVID has actually made people realize that collaboration is really important. I mean, 4 months ago, a lot of people would not have jumped onto a Zoom meeting like this, whereas I spoke to my 92-year-old mother via FaceTime about a week ago, which again would not have been possible with COVID. So people now realize that collaboration is essential. We're looking to really identify the gaps, as I said, and in the midterm, we're really trying to grow all of our members' businesses, but also start to look at getting them export ready as well. It's sort of one thing being able to respond to local challenges, but it's quite a different thing actually being ready for the international market. And then, of course, longer term, what we're looking at is really how can we then transfer these skills overseas, and also how can we transfer subsea capabilities to onshore, you know, markets which are not traditionally subsea, because there's a lot of things around AI and drone technology, etc., that transfers very easily. So that's, I guess, a brief overview of really what Seek is and where we're heading. Obviously, I just want to keep this very short to give Eric time for questions, etc. So yeah, over to Eric.
Thanks, Don. I'll do a quick introduction for Eric, and then we'll let him join us. So yes, so our final guest coming to us live from the Netherlands, where it's something like 6 or 6:30 in the morning. So if he looks a bit bleary-eyed, it's because we forced him out of bed to come and join us, is Eric Nijveld. So Eric is a founding partner of Technology Catalog and Deployment Matters, and I'll let him talk about the two different brands as he works through it. Prior to establishing the organization, Eric was a senior technology deployment manager working within Shell, and has had subsequently some very insightful opportunities within the client end of the industry, and is now working really hard to help industry, to help the supply chain understand how they can really position their solutions into that sector. So, so Eric, would you like to give us a bit of a background on your technology catalog and deployment matters, please?
Thanks, Francis, for the introduction, and hello everyone. Let me share my screen to start with. So indeed, the formal name of the company is Deployment Matters, although we more and more use our trade name technologycatalog.com. We launched the platform technologycatalog.com about 2 years ago in Q3 2018, very much building on the experience with technology deployment in Shell for many years, but also since we left Shell, supporting tens of operators. And yeah, it was all inspired by all the years with getting technology deployment going. And yeah, what's often said about the energy industry, that it's a bit risk averse or perhaps a bit conservative. But yeah, my own experience has been that yeah, people are keen, but they very often struggle to know what's all out there and to know who has used what. And by making that visible, and then by also linking people to the expertise to get deployment going, that actually helps to remove major hurdles for deployment. So this is a screenshot of the global platform. I won't give a live demo here during this, this call, but you can all go and visit this site. Access is free, technologycatalog.com. Also as a supplier, you can add your technologies for free. It doesn't mean that everything is for free. We also have paid services, but the basic level is for free for people to add their technologies or to access the data. And the opening screen then also highlights a couple of industries, so you can pick one, you can select the one you're in, and underneath you'll find multiple technologies, and we're making this more advanced over time. A bit similar to sites we're all very used to in our daily life, like TripAdvisor or Booking.com or other platforms, whereby you can quickly use filters to make a selection of hotels or restaurants, and in this case, technology. And to further illustrate this, this is very much the proposition. So we connect technologies to end users. Effectively, we give suppliers the opportunity to create visibility for their technologies 24/7. It's effectively a 24/7 online exhibition. And it helps end users have technologies at their fingertips. And then we also give expert consultants the opportunity to create visibility for themselves by writing reviews. And we're going to introduce some other functionality soon to really showcase the capability. And by linking these three groups together, these elements, it's not to say that by doing that deployment goes automatically, but at least visibility is being created, and it helps people to see, hey, this can be done. So the platform has grown steadily since the launch in Q3. Multiple technologies have been added. We're now above 220. I think actually since yesterday, actually above 230. A bit more than 25% coming from Australia, so that's great to see. And our target is to reach 500 before the end of this year. And we're well on track to meet the target. And also the target is to have thousands of technologies in a couple of years. And by having that smart filter functionality, it will help the users to quickly navigate through the content. And also, since we launched the platform, we welcomed over 26,000 unique visitors. Australia is ranked third, just before the UK, after Netherlands and USA. Over 200,000 page views by now. And yeah, besides that, we also support suppliers and end users with technology deployment. So one of the things, for example, that we do is to organize workshops, like the workshop technology deployment, how to get it done and maximize outcomes. It was done multiple times last year in partnership with NERA, and in total, last year alone, over 250 people attended one of the workshops, and also many people in the year to date. And we also organize webinars to showcase the technology, give suppliers the opportunity, and whenever we organize webinars, we really target specific people in the community to make sure that the right people attend the webinars, and this way giving the right visibility to the suppliers. Well, this is all about the global platform so far, but what we then also do is to localize the content or per country. So a great example is the work done jointly with NERA to develop an Australia energy technology platform, a portal to the technology catalog. And instead of having the global view, this platform shows at the homepage 4 modules, 4 areas, particularly of interest to Australian operators. And then all the technologies in the global database, at least those that are relevant to Australia, are then mapped against those areas. This way, giving operators a quick overview. This Australian platform already contains the filter functionality that can help to quickly then select and, for example, select the Australian suppliers or select certain suppliers with a specific focus area. And that way quickly focusing on the right content. So our plan is to launch multiple of these country platforms. Actually, we just signed an agreement also to deliver a similar platform in the UK, and Norway will likely follow soon as well. And again, yeah, the content of these country portals, they're populated with the content in the global database. So giving suppliers extra visibility. But then very important, we then also link the content to experts in the country, with people that can then help suppliers as well as operators with getting the technology deployed. So just one final slide on the work we do then to support people with getting technology deployment done. So we do various things. The workshop I already highlighted. One of the other things that we do is what we now call the tech positioning program, earlier known as the technology stress test. One of the outcomes of it is a spider diagram that you see on the bottom right. And yeah, this tech positioning program is very much based on the hundreds of deployments we've been involved in over the years. It helps with the tactics to get deployment done, but also many practicalities. And yeah, it helps suppliers to attract the right buyers for your technology. So we've just done one early this week again, positive feedback, so clear feedback from the supplier in this case, saying that this indeed added value and really helped to change the perspective to get the technology going. So that's all I want to share, and back to you, Francis.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you, Colin and Miranda, as well for your earlier comments. So I'll start off. I guess I'll warm up with a couple of questions, and then we'll go to the questions. I see a couple of questions starting to come in from the audience, but I'll leave people a few minutes to have a think about whatever they may wish to add to those questions. So I'll start off with one for you, Colin. There's a lot of very good small businesses with across the oil and gas supply chain rather who are struggling to gain market share, and they're really struggling to get their brand out there and get that kind of market penetration. What advice would you give to them in that situation?
Joinseeker.
That's a short answer.
Would be look. The issue is that, I mean, as a number of Seeker members said to me, well, why don't the operators know, you know, we have everything up on our website. So my reply to them, so when Woodside gets in the morning, what, they're going to sit down and log on to 70 different websites to find out if you've got a new bit of tech, if you've got a new profile. So really, I mean, it is, you know, by coming together as a group, Woodside has one place, or the operators have one place where they can go to find out everything that's happening subsea, all the innovations, etc. And you know, obviously that is one way to do it, because Woodside will come and talk to us, and we can present a whole lot of people. I think the other thing to be aware of too is in terms of contracting, etc. It's just realizing that big organizations, their contracting strategy means that to actually engage with a very small company is actually quite difficult. I mean, it's, you know, they obviously are very risk averse, and there's a lot of paperwork involved with their contracts for obvious reasons. So in terms of visibility, it might be better to think about maybe not going to the main operators, but going to the tier 1 or tier 2 suppliers who might already have contracts in place with the operators, because there's then the possibility of piggybacking on top of an existing contract, which then also has the advantage for the tier 1 or tier 2 supplier. They're then seen as value adding. So it's a sort of win-win completely. But I think it's just explore the other avenues, and also obviously come to people like NERA. And sorry, this question wasn't a setup, but you know, come to people like NERA who can give an awful lot of advice. You know, I mean, for a lot of small operators, you're not the first person to be having these problems. You know, and there is a lot of assistance out there. We recently organized a seminar by one of the major defense people in the material group, and the amount of support they will give to somebody trying to fill out a contract is phenomenal. But you've got to ask for it and got to know where to ask. So a number of things there, but I think that might have answered your question.
Thank you, Colin. And Eric, is there anything you'd like to add to that, as far as how small businesses across the supply chain can really become more visible for their potential customers?
Yes, so there are various things indeed they can do. Certainly, of course, the traditional ways, being visible at exhibitions and other places. certainly a platform that we now launched that can help. But I think also, a key point is, and that's more the responsibility of the operators to really make sure that the door is opened for novel technologies. What you often see in operating companies is that there are people responsible for development of technology, say up to trial of technology. And then very often it's left to the business to get the deployment going. But what's quite critical is that there's also a role in companies for people that are responsible for the second, the third, or the fourth deployment of technology, really start to sustainably embed technology into the business. Procurement clearly plays a key role, but that often is not sufficient. You also need someone really responsible for making sure things get over the threshold and get replicated a couple of times and sustainably embedded. So many things that the supplier can naturally do, but certainly the operators play a critical role as well. So it's important to have someone responsible for making sure that deployment gets going and value is delivered as a result.
Thanks, Eric. Anything you'd like to add to that, Miranda?
No, I think that they've covered the main points. I would just add that on a slightly different note, I think a question got asked about whether collaboration was seen as collusion and what the ACCC's position on it was. And I would say that there's a big difference between collusion and collaboration, and you can still be highly competitive within a cluster, for instance, or an export hub, and that the issue is whether there's a deliberate intent. From the ACCC perspective, the view is that if it's broadly in the if it's in the economic interest of Australia, then and the economic benefit overall is greater, then even things like collaborating on schedules for maintenance can be allowed. But in terms of the supply chain and the clusters, I think, Colin can testify to this. Clusters are well established around the world. Norway does it very well. And they have had clusters in the Norwegian oil and gas, and now as they're emerging into other sectors like carbon capture, utilization and storage, renewable offshore energy, aquaculture, and others, the Norwegians make very good use of clusters, and it is a fantastic way for small businesses to be able to come together to market and to basically share knowledge and skills across the SMEs, and to share experiences, because basically in the world that we live in now, we have to find as rapid, fast ways as we can to learn from each other and to not wait to keep repeating the same learnings. The quicker that you can find others that you can co-mentor with and share experiences and share knowledge, the better. And the more collaboration in that sort of area for Australia, the better. And again, I make the point that some of the technology companies might not be offering exactly the same technology or the same services, but they may have something that they can augment by working together. So they may be able to offer something that's a bigger service or a bigger value to their clients. And I think the other thing is about SMEs engaging with clients is the more engagement and the more opportunities you find to get to understand your clients, your potential clients, and for them to rub against you, the better, because ultimately it's all about trust and it's all about relationship. And you really have to find as many avenues as you can to be in that relationship building, education space. But yeah, that's probably enough from me.
That's great, thank you. Thanks very much, Miranda. Eric, if I can come back to you with I guess a follow-up question to what you said earlier there. From the suppliers of the technologies perspective, clearly there can be some real challenges in terms of understanding just what an operator is looking for, just what their customers are looking for, and the strengths and so forth within a supplier of technology that they may be seeking. Are there a few sort of tips that you would give to companies for them to for them to really think about as far as starting to position their, or strongly positioning their technologies into the marketplace?
Yeah, so and that's when we indeed advise suppliers. Yeah, we do that very much along the themes of the tech positioning program. So there are 7 themes there. The starting point is indeed to really think through who the, just to highlight one element, to really think through who the specific person is you really need to target. And yeah, that sounds like a logical thing to say, commonplace, but at the same time, it's very often not a simple question to answer. And very often, actually, I would say in more than 60-70% of the cases of the over 200 times we've now run such a tech positioning program, yeah, in our view, it's a different person that needs to be targeted than the supplier is really targeting. And that can be the case that the decision maker sits in a different line of the organization or perhaps a different level. And just to give one example of a tech positioning program we recently carried out for a wells technology. For wells technology, it's a logical entry point to go to a drilling manager or someone else in the wells community. But very often, the target can be a development manager, someone who holds the budget for a development, who may not be an expert in drilling technology, but who still needs to be aware that there may be ways to reduce the drilling cost by 40-50%. And that person is a key one to get a listening ear from, and the person then can put some gentle pressure on the wells people to say, hey, can you go after this technology because it can help to make the project fly instead of that it's put on hold. So it's these sort of conversations that we have, but then also help with the tactics on how to approach that person. And very often not based on, say, technical arguments, but really based on references and reviews. Like in daily life, where we're very much relying on reviews from the people around us to make decisions like where to buy a house or what plumber to go for. So references and reviews can really help in the whole influencing process. And the key thing to realize is, yeah, the technology deployment is for a large part an influencing game.
Excellent, thank you. And Colin, would what Eric's described there in terms of that need for relationships and understanding within your customers, would that be something that you would agree with from what you've seen from Seeker?
Look, I think very much so. I mean, I think the understanding, first of all, I mean, the thing that I've actually found quite interesting is in growing the cluster, our initial focus was looking at how do we get work in from the operators into the SMEs, but what we're actually finding, which we didn't expect, was now the SMEs actually understand what they each do, because we are having very regular meetings. We're actually seeing an awful lot of work between the SMEs, and they're actually doing collaborative projects. So there was something that they hadn't been able to solve, and suddenly they realized one of the other SMEs has a bit of tech that will solve their problem. And what we're also finding though with the operators is rather than going into a single point of contact within the big organizations, which always has the problem that when that person gets promoted, as normally happens, because the person who gets assigned to it is normally somebody who's on their way up, who's very keen and eager to take on extra responsibility. You've got to rebuild that relationship. So what Seeker's doing is with the operators is we're actually spreading our contact amongst probably within one of the operators, we have about 25 different contacts spread across the operator, and we interact with them through Microsoft Teams through a discussion board. So rather than having formal meetings, we try to make the interactions informal as possible. So rather than having a formal monthly meeting and presentation, we simply have the discussion boards there. So the operator can turn around and go, oh, look, I've got a question. And they can then flick the questions. And that goes out to all of our members. And similarly, it's a way our members can then post something there saying, by the way, we've just, there's one of our members, in fact, has just acquired a fairly complicated hybrid 3D printer that'll print metal, plastics, a whole range of other things. And one of the operators come back and, oh, can you do this? Oh, yeah. So we're trying to get away from this formal, here we have a problem, there's all the big documents, etc., to actually having a discussion around the issues before we actually get towards contractual stuff. So really, I think what we're trying to do is develop relationships and have conversations, which will then lead longer term into contracts. But it's actually having those discussions which then tease out the problems and really get a better understanding. So I think, but definitely it is having those informal relationships that are really important.
Sorry, Colin, I was just going to ask, so in the future, the Seeker cluster is also partnered with C on being an export hub. And sort of one of the big things for Australia is that we've tended to always focus on the local, and we've ignored the global opportunity. And therefore, in solving local problems, we've just talk a little bit, perhaps both of you, around how do we make sure that we're not just, how do we make sure that we augment our local unique proposition, because sometimes there are local things that we need to solve in a local context, but how do we make sure then that we've got a resilient business model, because we will never have a sustainable future if all we're doing is solving immediate local issues and we don't have a sense of the global opportunity. So yeah, maybe Eric, you could answer and then come back to Colin on the Seeker opportunity.
Yeah, I think indeed a couple of things here in Australia may be unique, but many of the challenges that you have are also global challenges, so that already helps. So it's also realization and to also make that visible to operators. So very often, it's been my experience that operators tend to think that the challenges that their assets have are unique, but the challenges that assets and projects in other parts of the world have, of course, there are some different issues, but there are also commonalities. So I think part of that to make sure that the suppliers make it visible that their solution just as well addresses the challenges in Norway, UK, or Southeast Asia as you do in Australia. So translate it to the user, for the user.
Look, I think that's actually very important, and I think, well, I mean, look, there are differences, but there are not differences. I mean, we have very different marine growth, and we've got very different fish, which actually do cause very unique problems here. But the local global model, the way it really works for a lot of our SMEs is they have the opportunity to, if it is a global operator, they do have the opportunity to showcase what they can do locally. And there's a couple, in fact, I had a meeting with one of our operators yesterday who's now moving into Gulf of Mexico and Angola, purely on what they've done locally. But by doing it well locally for the global operator, that then gets them a foothold into then the global. So this is one particular operator who, because they did really good work locally, they are now going to Houston to actually showcase it there for an opportunity to then do it globally. So yes, the local market is not as big as the global, but it's important to get it right here first. And I think it's also, again, I'll come back to, it's really important to utilize existing infrastructure like Austrade and things like that. The government does offer a lot of really great support, and also look to other, I mean, there are other members in Seeker who are international members. So it's possible to use other members to gain footholds or, you know, borrow offices locally or have, I mean, what we've been doing as well is, just a slight aside, but with COVID, with people not traveling, I've been working closely with the Canadian cluster, the Aberdeen cluster, and the Norwegian cluster, because our members can't fly to, you know, Houston, can't fly to Aberdeen. So we're sort of sharing hands and feet. So where we need hands and feet on the ground, and vice versa, we're sort of letting people put different hats on, as it were. So again, look, I think the thing is to make it work locally, make sure you've got a good product. But once you've got that relationship with the globals, even if it's with their local people, it then gets you in. So I think that's really important. But I think also understanding the fact that you've got to be export ready. I mean, there's a world of difference between doing business in Perth and say negotiating a contract in KL or Jakarta or Houston. I mean, just because your product is great doesn't mean you're going to get the business. You've got to be export ready. You've got to be trained in how to do business overseas. And I'm not talking about brown envelopes here, because that's just look at what happened to SNC Lavalin. What I'm talking about is just understanding and respecting how business is done in other places too. And don't underestimate the importance of having local agents. But again, I'd come back to use Austrade, use NERA. Because the Australian government does have far reach. But that's where I'm coming from.
Good. Right, I'm going to go to a couple of questions we've had put in onto the Q&A system for us here. So I'll start off with one for you, Eric. So how do you ensure that the catalogue doesn't diminish in value over time? Or put another way, how do you qualify candidates to admission into the catalogue such that you mitigate potential dumbing down of listed technologies, and how do you stop it becoming another internet of everything?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Indeed, it's a good question. So the way we actually, the mechanism for that is pretty much we leave it up to the market, but where the checks and balances come in is through reviews and references. So those of you who have come to the platform may have seen already that for every technology there's an opportunity to add reviews and show references. And a bit similar to the way platforms like Booking.com or TripAdvisor work, with one clear difference: we wouldn't allow any anonymous reviews, and that is the key thing. So there's no expert who's going to say anything nice about the technology if he or she doesn't mean it. And so that in itself, even if a technology didn't have any review yet, the fact that reviews will come in at some point in time will keep the suppliers honest. And like with hotel sites, you can say how fantastic your hotel is, fantastic view, Olympic-sized swimming pool, whatever, but 2 or 3 reviews later that it perhaps wasn't that fantastic, you're back with your feet on the ground. And so as a supplier, you can say how fantastic your technology is, but if you say 6 months later, you still haven't managed to attract a single review for your technology, that pretty much tells the story. And what end users very much appreciate about this platform is that it can help them to quickly make the selection. So creating a list of 10,000 technologies at the end is easy. You just go to a big exhibition and you ask all the exhibitors, well, what have you got? And before you know it, you have a long list. But what they all struggle with is how to then downsize that list to a manageable 30 or 40 or whatever that applies to them. And the quickest way to do that is based on references and reviews, particularly if those reviews come from credible sources. So that, checks and balances come in through the market. Having said that, whenever we advise operators directly, and if operators ask our opinion, then we say, hey, if we were you, we would start with these 10 or 20. So directly to operators, we do give our opinion, but on the platform itself, you won't see any reviews from ourselves there. So we leave it up to the market.
Thanks for that, Eric. We got one here from Michael, who was actually one of the speakers last week, so Michael Eilert. And this is really one probably for both of you, but we'll see where we go, and I'll let you jump in, see who's going to be first on this one. There are many SMEs that provide innovative services to the oil and gas industry. Like many SMEs, we have a small business development team. How can we market other companies' goods and services from others during international sales meetings, and others do the same for us? So this is really around that sharing and understanding what your peers within the industry have. How best do you believe we could get the most value from our peers having meetings?
I mean, I think that comes down to just collaboration, understanding what the other people in the industry are doing. I mean, certainly any role I've been in, I mean, if it's in your interest to do it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you are providing. You can on-sell other companies capabilities, because at the end of the day, I mean, it means that more people will come to you because you have a reputation of, if you can't fix it, you at least redirect them to the right place. Therefore, you become a trusted advisor, as it were. So I think it's around building those relationships and understanding what other companies do. And then obviously, you know, knowing that they have sufficient integrity that you can recommend them. I mean, I think that's the only way you can do that. Apart from, you know, you can get quite complicated and sign NDAs and memorandums of understanding, etc. But I think that gets a bit complicated. I think you've got to let your product sell itself, but make sure as many people know about it as possible.
Yeah, perhaps to build on that. So yeah, I think typically you can say, so asset managers, all the decision makers in operating companies, they're quite reasonable people, provided that you first add value. And the moment you've done a couple of deployments that made money for them, they're open to new things. So the proven technologies can very much help to pave the path for the novel ones. And certainly if you have a novel technology, yeah, it's like in daily life. If here right now the doorbell rings and someone tries to sell me something and I don't know the person, yeah, and I may not be so inclined to buy it right away. But if that same person has added value to me previously, yeah, then I'm prepared to listen. So that's how suppliers can also help each other, and that's also where trade organizations can play a role. So I'm not sure about the Australian trade organization, but we're now in discussion with the Dutch trade organizations. And something that actually we're helping them with is to create this overview per country of which technologies have already been used somewhere or which technologies could apply. And by having that overview quickly available for the various consulates around the world, it helps them to indeed make that sort of grouping and indeed say, hey, these things have already been done and this novel technology can be a logical next one. And hey, remember the other ones added value to you and give it a try. So that way, say, triggering that conversation that can help that the new technologies take advantage of these successful case histories that have already taken place. But to allow that to happen, indeed, the folks in the various countries that help with the trade, other ways to position technologies, yeah, they do need to have that overview. And that's certainly an area where also the Australia platform that we've now launched jointly with NERA can play a role also to help with the positioning of the trade.
Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen. So I've got a quick question for you, Eric, and then I'll have one closing question, and we'll close the session down. I guess as an observer of the technologies that are coming onto the catalogue from Australia, are you seeing any particular specializations or anything where you're seeing a sort of a particular leaning in one direction or another across the numbers of companies that are registering the catalogue?
Yeah, well, absolutely. First of all, so I attended AOG this year and also last year and was part of the NERA pavilion. So that was great. And I was really impressed by the technologies that are under development or have now matured. And certainly a couple of areas where there are clear strengths, certainly digital technologies, but also remote operations. And yeah, I still remember also from the time I did my studies, I did a traineeship at the time in Australia in the 90s. And at that time, Australia was really at the forefront of distance learning. And you see the same now happening with remote operations. Just the fact that you have these long distances, it's a very convincing story that you know from experience how you can do things remotely. And you don't need to give many details because everyone knows what a big country Australia is. So people see that automatically. So that's clearly an area where I see great technologies coming up, but really, where people immediately believe that you have a strength there. And the remote ops technologies, they apply everywhere. And particularly in the current COVID-19 era, just to illustrate with one example, I spoke to someone in Malaysia the other day, and they indeed said at the moment now someone goes offshore for 2 weeks before they go back to the family, they need to be in quarantine for some time. I'm not sure how long the period today is, but effectively the day that they were, say, effective, has now been reduced significantly as a result. And technologies that can help to gather data in a different way, do the operations remotely, can make a huge difference also in today's time. And perhaps to add one more element to that, whenever we support operators, there are typically always 5 themes where always impact can be made. And one of the themes is to optimize the movement of staff and goods by looking at ways to gather the data in a different way, or to optimize the logistics, or perhaps eliminate logistics where needed. But a couple, these elements like optimize logistics or gather the data in a different way, they're clearly areas where the Australian suppliers have fantastic solutions for.
Excellent. Right. Now, one last question for a really quick answer from each of you. So pick your favourite quick answer on this, if you would, and then we've got to move on. The industry is seeing a lot of challenges right now. We've got COVID, we've got declining oil price, we've got the move from a carbon-based to a decarbonising economy. Where are you seeing sort of if you had to pick one future trend that for a supply chain company to really think about when it's planning its way through where we are right now, what would that be?
I think really just make your supply chain as lean and versatile as possible, because I think given the disruption that's currently happened, is COVID going to be something that's going to come around every 5 years? Is sort of civil unrest in various countries going to be the norm now that we've got that sort of disruption happening? I think keep everything as remote and movable as possible. Yeah.
Excellent. That's good. Thank you. Eric, quick answer.
Well, just and like every crisis, it gives opportunities as well. And what you see is now what's quickly becoming acceptable is to deliver services remotely. So at the moment, we're supporting an Asian company. And in the past, they would just say, hey, come over, we want to see you face to face. And now it becomes totally acceptable to deliver services remotely. And you see that everywhere happening at the moment. I think that trend at the moment as a result of COVID-19 also offers fantastic opportunities to Australian companies. You are a bit remote indeed from many parts of the world. But with this trend, it's totally acceptable to deliver services from a distance. And I think that also opens up ways to start supporting customers wherever they are around the world.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you both. It wasn't intended as a trick question at the end, but I just thought I would throw that one in. There was a bit of a future focus where we go next. So look, I'll close off now. Thank you, Eric and Colin, and in absentia, Miranda unfortunately has had to leave, so thank you to Miranda as well. I hope that those of you who've joined and been part of this conversation have found what we've had from these three excellent speakers, interesting and useful. And the video will be available, the recording will be available of this in the next couple of days, so feel free to share it among your colleagues, take it home, watch it with the family over the weekend, whatever you do for entertainment on a weekend. This is the last of this series. That when this webinar closes, there will be a quick survey that will pop up. If you have 2 minutes, it'd be great if you could just go through and answer the questions. They are really quite literally just a quick click the box. If you've got any thoughts and anything to add into it, that would be brilliant. And then finally, we are planning a couple of new webinars on some other themes in the next few weeks. We're still working on exactly what the details for those will be at the moment. But if you want to know more about what we're doing and what we've got up in that regard, then please do keep an eye on both our website and also sign up for the newsletter that we push out about once every month or so, we're not an organisation that will fill your mailbox up every other day with 3 or 4 marketing advertisements. That's not the way we operate. So please do feel free to check that one out. And yes, thank you everyone for your time. It's been great to be part of this set of webinars.